So, hi, Amy, and thank you very much for agreeing to join us at In Leader's Mind. This is my kind of like video cast that, helps me bring some real talent to my audience. And so I am super pleased to have you with us, AmyK. You are a published author. You have been a member of Vistage for many years. You are a Vistage speaker. How can I say, a 2,600 times proven one. And so, and the book that you recently published is qualifying you for more than just a how can I say, expert in the area.
You're sweet, but let's keep expectations low, Thomas. Let's just let everybody kind of come into this, a little low-hearted here.
Very good. So today's discussion is going to be about conversations. And so since we all have difficult conversations, Amy, you will help us soften the anxiety that builds around having conversation with people that we need to have, whether they're related to performance, personal behavior, something. Why don't you tell us about what do you find interesting in that field?
Well, I think what's probably we can all relate to is that all of us at some point or another have either completely avoided, or attempted a tough conversation. And there's a cost. And what I think is fascinating is that, just because I'm a little bit of a nerd, I'm a little bit of a geek. So 2 quick stats for those who like some. On average, an executive will avoid a tough conversation from 6 months to 2 years on average, which means that sometimes it's longer. And the cost of that can be like the tangible cost of, I know there's a lot of organizations through their research have said it can be $7,500 as like the average, cost of a tough conversation. But think about the stress, the turmoil, the lack of performance, the impact on culture, in addition to the financial.
Correct.
So to me, one of the things, and I'll just talk about my own experience, you can go to Toastmasters, you can learn how to give a presentation in front of the board, but nobody really teaches you, what do you say when Sarah's underperforming and you need her to commit and go next level, or your partner just stole money from the company and thought he could return it, or like all these tough conversations. And by the way, I'm not making those up. Like those are like real things that have happened in my Vistage group. And so one of the things that I think that's just fascinating to me personally too, is that there are so many times when I've sat down for that tough conversation early in my career, and I would insert foot in mouth, or I would think of the perfect thing to say 6 hours later when I was swirling my cocktail. And I was like, these conversations are so important. They matter. What if we got better at it? And so that kind of launched my career of leadership, communication, and critical thinking, which is what I geek out on. So that's kind of like the impetus behind why I love what I do.
Well, and I get goosebumps for the word geek because that means we're going to have a really good data-driven conversation with some passion. So tell me about that. So basically, since we touched on that topic of avoiding conversations or fumbling them, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us some meat and potatoes on that topic? How do we do it right?
One of the things that I think that's interesting, and you and I were chatting about this before we started, and that is, too many times, somebody will need to have a performance conversation, and the person that we're giving feedback to is blindsided by the fact that we're annoyed, we're upset, we're disappointed in their behavior. And it's because we haven't... Go ahead.
That's a 10 out of 10. In my experience, whenever I get assigned coaching because of the performance and I start a conversation with a subject, it is deer headlights, right? Yeah. It's just, I never thought. Now, whether that is a defense mechanism or true reality, I'm not sure. So please tell us more.
Well, we can do anecdotal evidence and then, one of the things that I find fascinating too is that I do sales trainings, I have my sales inner circle. And a lot of the things that I do in my sales inner circle is the fact that you can also have a high performing person. So like typical in sales, like my background is I have a really high performing individual who's like an A player in sales, but they're a C- as a team player. So like they're a rock star, cowgirl, cowboy for sales, but then they stink when it comes to like the team dynamic, sharing best practices, supporting one another. So what we typically do as leaders, just kind of anecdotally, is we'll say, I don't know how to have that conversation, so I'm just going to avoid it or put it off. until it's like, okay, I have to have it now. Like, this is no longer acceptable. And it's partly because we know that high performing people are very sensitive to criticism. Like, they don't want the feedback that says you still have room for improvement. So there's a beautiful 6-question framework. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a big believer of practical tools. So we're just going to dive into this really quickly because it's so effective. And I have no ego around this tool, Thomas, because I got it from one of the most successful agents in the NFL, the National Football League in the United States. He was wildly successful. This is his secret sauce. And so, by the way, he doesn't even take credit for it. It goes back to Aristotle. So it's been around for a while for a reason. It works. So the first thing that we do is we're going to ask somebody what their strengths are. We're literally going to come in. We're going to say, hey, so Thomas, I'll just role play with you. So let's say you're on my sales team or you're on my executive team. I'm going to sit down with you no more than twice a year. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say, Thomas, what are your strengths? What are you contributing to the organization? What are you contributing to the team? How are you a significant player in the trajectory of our company, our goals, our objectives? We're going to stroke your ego is what we're going to do. But we're not insincerely, but we're going to do strengths. And then I'm going to say, what's working for you as an individual? What's working for us as a team? Now, what's working is operationally, like the systems, the processes, what we've got going on an operational level. And then I'm going to say, okay, are we aligned on your 30, 60, 90, 180, 18-month goals, whatever makes sense. You fill in the blank for a time frame. But notice my wording. This is all psychological. What are your strengths? What's working? Are we aligned on the expectations? And then I'm going to do a jujitsu. And I'm going to say, what's the benefit to you? What's the benefit to the team? What's the benefit to our organization or our industry, our community, our charities, whatever? Again, pick your 3 that are the most significant. What are the benefits to these areas when you knock it out of the park, when you meet and exceed these objectives that we just talked about and got aligned on?
Interesting.
Then and only then am I going to say, Thomas, what are some of your concerns? What could prevent you from being successful? And again, if we're meeting twice a year, this is the next 6 months or Q4 or the first half of the year, whatever. And then I'm going to say things that are inside of your control, things that are outside of your control. So if you've got a whiner, if you've got a finger pointer, I'm already putting guardrails around the within your control and outside of your control. And then we get to the most important question number 6. And that is, so what are we going to tweak? What are we going to do more of? What are we going to do better? What are we going to do differently to ensure your success? And if you need to really hold the person accountable, what are you going to do? What are you going to tweak? What are you going to modify? But here's the beauty of that. All of that says, I'm building toward problem solving. I'm letting you understand your role, what's working, your contribution before I say, and now it's time to step up and play better. And if you need to, I'm a big fan of the magical phrase, how might we? So how might we use this beautiful phrase? They use it all the time at Harvard. They use it at Stanford, which you will appreciate. And one of the things that I love about how might we is we can sit down and we can ideate. We don't have to figure it out today. But what I love about it is it's your voice matters. So I'm literally saying, I want you to co-create a better future with me. I want your buy-in. I want your engagement. So often what I will do is I will place the 6-question framework under the umbrella of how might we make you a more successful integrated team player.
Love it.
And then that's what I do twice a year with my direct reports and what I did in corporate. And so what I love about this is just one magical conversation to get greater buy-in and engagement and to let people know that they matter to making your vision come true.
Got it. Excellent. So you are crowning your positivity of the conversation with a positive proposal as to, or positive think tank, how we're going to do even better, which completely avoids the need for direct confrontation and minimizing the person in any way, which is clearly something you wouldn't want to do to a toxic or non-toxic high performer.
Yeah, and I think that you nailed it in the sense of when we go to give constructive feedback, what typically happens is a person will get defensive and then their behavior actually dips after a performance review.
Yep.
And so what we want to do is we want to avoid that dip and keep the trajectory going forward. Now, that doesn't mean, so I'm very positive, but I'm not toxic positivity. That doesn't mean that after one of these conversations, you might need to pull a lazy louse aside and be like, okay, I need to make it clear. We're putting you on a 90-day probation. Here's what we expect of you. Like you might need to have that tough conversation too.
Yep.
But here's what I've discovered personally, my own experience. When I start with somebody's strengths, or even in a meeting, so it's the same point, just different example, you could use this framework to do a post-mortem on a project or initiative. What were the strengths of the project we just delivered? What worked? Did we meet all of our objectives? What was the payoff to those? What were some of our concerns going forward? Okay, what would we tweak in the next project? Like, it doesn't have to be person specific. But what I love about it is it prevents the defensiveness. It prevents the lame blame game. And it also gets people forward focused.
Absolutely.
Like I'm not going to dwell on the past. I'm not going to vent. And I think what cracks me up, and I'm laughing because I can actually remember some of these meetings. You walked in, Thomas, and you thought it was going to be a productive meeting, and it turned to be a total waste of time because everybody wanted to vent. This is not a cheesy, we're going to not talk about it. This is not a cheesy, we're brushing things under the rug. It's just psychologically saying that by the time that you talk to concerns, you're not venting, you're problem solving. And that's a huge shift in thinking, which, lights me up.
Absolutely. And I do feel the distinction, but I think it's good for our audience to restate it. This is for people who would need a structure to make sure that they cover the bases in a positive manner that builds on itself and whatnot. How about, did you see the system working equally well for those that like to get to it right away?
Because
the
I've had people do
boss.
that. Yes. Yeah. So I'll have people say, well, I want to do it. I'm like, hey, and literally I'll say, I'm getting to that. Just hold for a second, because I'm going to actually ask you that question, but I'm not there yet. So if you could just respect, let's get through this one. And then there's times where people will just say something like, well, they'll do the dramatic emotional vent, right? They'll be like, well, nothing works around here. Or, it's Dan's fault, or it's AmyK messed up, right? And I'll say, hold that, because I want to know the thought behind that. I want to know your thinking behind that, but I'll get to that comment in a minute. So then when I get to concerns, and this is a fabulous jujitsu thing as a coach or a leader.
Yep.
Let's say you come back and I say, okay, Thomas, you made a provocative comment. And I use that specifically. You made a provocative comment. You said that it's all AmyK's fault. What's the thought behind that comment? Help me understand. Now, notice what I'm doing. I didn't say why, because I don't want you to feel defensive. But I'm also putting the onus of critical thinking back on you. You just made a really emotional comment. Now I want you to think it through. Like, are you going to double down, or are you going to actually start to be like, well, it wasn't entirely AmyK's fault, but her department dropped the ball over here. Okay, say more about that and what contributed to that. Like, we can unpack that without you doing this.
Yes. Excellent. Great. So most of the time, and by the way, I think audience, including me, will probably have to watch this presentation more than once to get all of the details. AmyK, obviously, you're full of quick and meaningful suggestions, and they flow out of you very, very beautifully. So thank you for that. So when we deal with dysfunction on the team, that's where conversations are the most important. Are there any conversations that we would want to have in times of positivity? I ask that because much of my team of CEOs that I'm thinking of, it's not the only thing, but there is one team that has a specifically difficult time celebrating success.
Yeah.
So in other words, what kind of conversation would we have there?
Well, it's specifically about celebrating success.
Well, so this is one of those things, success doesn't come easy. It comes with lots of effort. And people who are in a hurry to create more and move on, essentially see the path to the success, assume that it is done, and are thinking of the next thing while the team is delivering the first part. Yeah. Right? When the time comes that actually the champagne bottle should be popped, everybody's tired, everybody's hoping for it, but the boss is ready to move on to the next thing, and he brushes off or she brushes off any big discussion about celebration or our thank you note. So how do we learn that?
Yeah. So one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we do have those celebratory moments is we do the raw thank you speech without doing the empathic connective speech. So it's kind of like, let's just say we met a big $5 million milestone. So for your small entrepreneur groups, your trusted advisor groups, small businesses, 5 million is a huge milestone, right? For those who are at 350 million, whatever, but five, just for the sake of this example, let's say you have a team of 25 people, you just got to the 5 million. Typically what we do is we open up champagne. We'll take everybody to dinner and we'll be like, thank you. This was amazing. You guys did it. Our next milestone is 7.5 million. Can't wait to see you on Monday. Like, have a good time tonight, but show up on time on Monday. Thank you. Thank you. And we're done. You will not get increased buy-in and engagement. You will get burnout and resentment on that pace. As soon as the leader says, Thomas, what made a huge difference to this project was your willingness when you met with John Doe. And you go around and you recognize every single individual, and you also have an empathic connection. There were tough days. There were tough days when we wanted to quit, or there were days when we couldn't believe so-and-so. And Joe, remember when like you had to put out the small fire in the back pantry? Like when you let them know that you saw them, that you were a witness to some of the pain, the grind, the sweat, and the tears, that you recognized them for the moments when it wasn't all fun. When and you saw it and you actually empathize with them and you call it out, the minute that they feel, and I'm going to repeat myself on purpose, the minute that they feel seen, heard, understood, and witnessed at one of their vulnerable spots, and that you still think the world of them, now you're going to get loyalty and forward momentum. And you can't do it insincerely. So years ago, I had a boss. God, it drove me nuts, Thomas. He would come around and he'd be like, good job, AmyK, good job. And like the thought in my head is, you have no idea. You are clue free about what I'm doing. But when the boss would come around and say, you know, that chart that you made that totally changed that prospect's perspective and got him to actually move faster, that was really brilliant. Thank you, AmyK. I'll shine for you. I will go the extra mile for you because it was sincere, it was very specific, and it was selective. So that's what I think that like when we do in those celebratory moments is we get very sincere, very specific, very selective, and people will be loyal to you till the day is done as long as you're consistent in that and you're not labile and you're, ooh, good job, oh, you all stink. Good job, oh, you all stink.
No. This is great, and I'm first of all, this is super relevant because it explains. First of all, many of the CEOs have a hard time even thinking of the bottle of champagne.
Right.
Those that do find it, I would say, a difficult time to relax and celebrate when there is so much stuff to be done, right? And when they do, they fumble it. And so, and I'm one of them. I mean, I'm not, I'm relating here to my career as well. I'm so driven that sometimes celebration is, well, you know, is that the best that we can do? I mean, don't we have better goals, right? And so there's this internal conflict that says, okay. And, but since I took some time off to reflect and whatnot, I have seen how important it is. And you're absolutely right. These generalized thank yous and confetti and big speeches from one side without any empathy don't work.
No, in fact, what it often does is it builds resentment depending on where your value systems align with your spend. And so I've witnessed where CEOs will call me up and they'll be like, you know, everybody's mad, but we took them all to Hawaii. You know, we put them up in a 5-star hotel for a week, and then we're all back, and they're not happy. And I was like, well, some of them have probably thought, Hawaii, who cares? Some of them went to Hawaii and looked around and thought, why are we spending money on this when I actually need to hire somebody and you haven't let me hire somebody? So you have all these conflicting values. And I know I'm biased because this is what I've been doing for 25 years, but I think it all goes back to ineffective communication about how are we talking about what's important and the why behind the choices that we're making? And then that also helps you question some of the choices that you're making.
Ineffective communication and no training, right?
Yeah.
Because this
And
is this.
that's an innocent thing. Yeah,
It is an innocent thing, absolutely, but it in the same time. I mean, leadership is a very counterintuitive field, and so
It is.
training is a necessity. So thank you for this. I think there was half a dozen brilliant things here that I'll have to pull out as bullet points and teasers down in the description. So let's talk about the life of possibility. So you
Okay.
have this recognized sense of optimism and turning just about any situation into a winning situation. Where does it come from? Is it learned behavior?
Oh, for sure, it's learned. And I think that, so let's just take a deep breath for a second. I'm very driven. I'm a very type A go-getter, but I'm not toxic positivity. I'm not the Pollyanna, it's all good. I'm a realist optimist. And it's learned because and I'll be very candid about this. And this is just to me how we all learn from each other. So as a Vistage member, as a Vistage speaker, this is part of the beauty of Vistage, is that we're going to peel back some layers here. Mm-hmm. Mindset to me is more important than I think we're even giving it credit to as like the recent trend. I mean, mindset's been around for thousands of years with Hindu and Buddhism for a reason. And I'm not getting into religion. I'm getting into a spiritual practice of how do you want to show up in the world? How do you want to be as your capacity? Who are you becoming? Like, to me, that's a fundamental question of Vistage, full stop. So if I were going to joke and say, hey, Thomas, today I'm bleeding teal, Vistage colors, it's the who am I up to becoming as a leader? And that's where I spend most of my work when I work with sales leaders and executives is who are you as the leader? Who are you as the human being? Expanding your capacity, dealing with your suffering, serving others so that they suffer less, they expand their capacity. And that's a choice. So over the years, there's a great parable in Buddhism, and it's called the second arrow. And for I'm sure you're familiar with it as a studier of this, but for those who are listening or watching the replay, the second arrow is what's called dirty pain. Life is going to shoot an arrow at us. That's clean pain. You know, somebody wrongs us. We have loss, we have grief, we make a mistake. That's the first arrow of being human. But the second arrow is a choice. It's the one we inflict upon ourselves. How long am I going to ruminate on this? How long am I going to beat myself up? How long am I going to have my inner critic or my disciplinarian be in charge of my existence? And that's what my terminology is. That's when you give your power away. So when we as leaders can deal with the arrows that are coming at us all the time, but instead of adding that second arrow, and really picking on ourselves or saying, woe is me, you know, why is this happening to me? When we pluck out that arrow and don't put in the second one, that's a choice. And that's a conscious choice. And the more that we learn how to do it, the more power we have and how we want to show up and how we want to play the game, because it's all a game.
It is a game. It is a game, and the sooner you learn that it is a game, the sooner you have a chance of actually learning some of the gold nuggets, like what you have said, that part of any drama is self-inflicting drama.
Yeah.
You know, unless we are present, our observer is there, we follow a prescribed process. If we do not have the spiritual or other kind of motivation or monitoring in our mind. And so this is an excellent example. I called it grace, at least part of it. So oftentimes the discussion about leadership comes down to what good do you want to make in the world? Why is world going to be a better place because you were there?
Yeah,
right?
I think it's a huge piece of it. I
Yeah.
really do. And I think that it's realizing it's beyond whatever business you're in. I mean, I joke, I could never be the CEO of a tequila company. Now, I am so glad there are tequila companies in the world, right? But that's not my calling. Like, I'll drink the margarita. I don't want to produce, and grow, grow the cacti for the agave. But I think that on a serious note, though, if I were running a tequila factory today, I'm in it for the people. I'm in it, and I don't even mean the people that are buying the product. I mean the people who are employed, the people whose dreams I'm managing, who are putting people, through school. Putting their kids through school. Getting an education themselves, learning you have to kind of look at, okay, I've taken on this leadership role. Now I have a responsibility to serve. That's not new. That's not anything new, but yet we don't actually show up to consciously be in the practice of that. And that's why I've spent 25 years doing self-leadership. I mean, I'm talking about the conversations in here so that you can have conversations outside with people that move the whole needle. But it starts with you. There's a great quote. I won't take credit for it, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now who said it. But in order to lead others well, you must first lead yourself well. And that's, to me, the gift of Vistage, is coming in and saying, am I leading myself well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is kind of like one of those primary principles of leadership, period, right? Yeah. Where do you start? Can you be a leader with no followers, right?
Yes, you can.
You know, absolutely, because you need to follow your own intention.
That's right. It's like, and the first followers are me, myself, and I. But
that's right.
You know, it's so true. It is so true. But I think that to get practical, then too, a great exercise. So no matter what time of year that you're listening to this, I'm always a fan of pour yourself a glass of water, a glass of wine, something stronger, whatever floats your boat, and sit down and saying, you know, what conversations am I avoiding? What's the cost of avoiding them? And then if I really believe that the life that I want, the company that I want, the team that I want is on the other side of a tough conversation, then how do I set myself up to lead the most critical and important conversations to move forward on the path that I'm trying to create? And then go have them.
Love it. Love it. And a common discussion at Vistage, for sure. Right. Let's be empathetic of the leaders who have to have those conversations, who personally may be wired to be avoiders, maybe assertive, direct people, etc., etc. A variety of different personality may sit behind it. When you have to have those conversations, how do you prep yourself mentally?
Okay, so thanks for the segue. And Thomas, I know you didn't mean to do this, but one of our core values at our company is generosity, really and truly. So one of our free tools, if you go to AmyK.com and you scroll all the way down, there's a free tool called the Conversation Prep Planner. It's our most popular tool. I know you didn't know that, but it was a beautiful setup. But it's free. So there's no sales pitch, no Ginsu knife set. You can go get that. But here's the thing that I want to do is if you have no desire to do that and you're listening to this, I'm a big fan of practical value. So here's what I'm going to say. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to sit down and you're going to say, what is the bigger, better, bolder question we're trying to answer? And you're going to frame your whole conversation around the question that you're trying to answer. Mm-hmm. So, and then I'm going to encourage you to frame it as a how might we, so that you and this person that you're talking to are on the same side of the table, figuratively, metaphorically.
Yep,
so how might we grow by 12%? How might we turn this around? How might we ensure this never happens again? How might we get the ideal partnership we want? Whatever it is, fill in the blank. And then if this is a tough conversation for you, if this is one of those that you have been dreading or you're not even sure how to start it, say that. So if I were to come to have a difficult conversation with you, the most beautiful thing that I could say to start this conversation well is to say, Thomas, this conversation is overdue because I've been avoiding it. This is a really important conversation and it matters to us or the prospect or the client or the team. And so it's going to be tough, but it's really important. Now, what I've done is I've just said a little empathic vulnerability followed by, and it matters. So I've stroked your ego and I've stroked the significance. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, this is important psychologically. I've told your ego, this is important. You matter. And I'm going to be vulnerable saying that this is hard for me. Now I've got connectivity instead of a power play. So now I'm starting the tough conversation that I've been avoiding. Or you don't have to be that vulnerable. You could just walk in and say, okay, look, this is going to be a slightly awkward conversation and it really matters. It matters to the team. It matters to the project. So notice my tone and tenor shifts too. I'm a little more matter of fact, but I'm like, okay, this is an awkward conversation, but it's important. Again, a little vulnerability followed by, okay, this is significant and I need your attention.
Love it. Love it. And that is something you have put in a systemic set of words that people can follow. And I can tell you anecdotally that is kind of one of those things that most CEOs that I work with are craving. And that is, self-perception that when I'm going to discipline someone, or where I'm going to have a difficult conversation towards any kind of improvement, change, or, even worse, it is one-sided. Right. The preparation means I'm going to have to invest the emotion into and energy into this discussion, and there is no positive outcome, right? For me or them, right? Because I don't like being disliked. I don't like being the jerk in the room. And I know that there is something good in them, but I have to basically put them one step lower in one way or another. And so this negativity that comes from that, oftentimes, from what I've seen, is remedied, cured by a little bit of genuine admittal.
Yes.
Which is what you have said.
Yes. And I think that context specific, when it's appropriate, to send your questions ahead of time. And so, one of the things that, like, you just made a really great point, is that we feel like we have to bear the burden of all the critical thinking, of all the emotional labor that goes into this conversation. If we were to say, hey, and again, it could be just to role play, Thomas, how might we make you a more integrated, successful team player? I send that to you in an email. We're going to meet on Tuesday. I'm inviting you to the Zoom call or in my office in person. How might we make you a more integrated, successful team player? Which is kind of a nice euphemism for, like, why can't you step up, right? Why can't you be a team player and right? And so, but that's the conversation that I want to go to. Like, that's forward focus, not I'm in trouble, right? And then you could include 1, 2, 3. You could include all 6 of the questions that we frameworked earlier. You could say, how might we leverage more of your strengths? Where can we close the gaps? What resources do you need from me to be more successful? Or it could be a project goal of where are the first 5 things that you think you need to do to get started? Like, whatever it is, you put in a couple questions, and here's the wonderful outcome. Now you both share responsibility for being prepared. If that person comes unprepared, that's going to be your first thing. And again, not why. What's causing the resistance for you not to be prepared? What were the thoughts behind you not even wanting to be prepared, right? So that's that conversation. But if they do come prepared, then now you're sharing the responsibility of the dynamic of, we're problem solving together. I'm not venting. This conversation is not about criticism. This is about moving forward constructively in a better, healthier way.
Love it. And I think that this having a system is having this muscle memory of knowing that it can be diffused to personal empathy towards yourself, empathy to the person you work, and then a system that removes the pent-up anger, negativity, or avoidance that can be built into this conversation. I will certainly try to post the 6th question into our comments so that people can take that and practice them as much as they can, because it's relevant. It really, really matters.
Well, you nailed it. It's practice, and it's being okay with it. It doesn't go perfectly the first time. In fact, when I went in the Vistage group a couple of years ago, one of the CEO members was like, you make it look like seamless. I'm like, you can make it look seamless too. Nobody cares if you take a journal and put these questions in front of you. I said, showing up prepared, that's not a problem. I said, and the psychological framework works. Now, I will tell you, there's a fun story. A Vistage member called me years ago, Thomas, and he said, your tool doesn't work. And I was like, no, it works. Like, what'd you do? And he was like, I went in and I said, what are your strengths and what do you want to change? I was like, yeah, that's not the tool. So you got to follow the questions.
Exactly. Probably the tone also does not adhere to the intent. I love it. Well, so I mean, we chatted before our interview, and you revealed some of the things that there is an unintentional but measurable delay between when are we supposed to, when we recognize that we need to have a difficult conversation versus the avoidance time that what carries it into, what did you say, 7 to 20 months or something like that?
Oh yeah, no, the average is 6 months to 2 years, which means it can be, a few months. It can be longer than 2 years, but the stats show us 6 months to 2 years. And if you think about that, now this is where I find it more fascinating. Mm-hmm. Let's just say you're waiting in that 2 years to have multiple tough conversations because you're conflict avoidant. And then You're conflict avoidant because that's the story in your head, that this is going to be a conflict instead of, wait a minute, this is just going to be a really important conversation that's going to make everybody breathe and play better on the other side of it. And by the way, the 2 years that you're avoiding it, every single one of those on average is $7,500 US. So by the time that you're done with a year of conversations you haven't avoided it, you were talking maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about the person that left because you didn't know how to get that A player to actually stay on. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Love it, love it. And I think that the benefit that is kind of implied here as well, and that is, if you have a tool. Okay, so we think of, let me just step back. When we think about this conversation, we're thinking about pulling a bandage off of the crusted wound, right? It's not going to be easy. It's going to hurt. It's going to pull some hair off and blah, blah, blah. Yucky, 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 right? Nothing that we want to do. So we avoid it. And then, when it comes down to it, when we absolutely must do it, then we would love to rip it off if we could, just to be done with it. Yeah. And so this system, these 6 questions that we can use, allows us to change our expectation. First of all, it doesn't mean that it needs to hurt.
Correct.
Second of all, if that means that it doesn't hurt, it means that it doesn't have to be avoided.
Right.
If it doesn't have to be avoided and I have something on my heart to unburden myself, or some conversation I need to have to help someone, I will be willing to do it sooner.
And if you take the attitude of, I'm going into this conversation to connect with you because I'd like your life to be less painful. I'd like to make sure that we're setting you up to be successful. That's a mindset shift in me. That now this tough conversation is a supportive conversation. Doesn't mean it's less tough, but my whole intention around it. And I'm going in with the attitude of not having this conversation is more expensive. The cost of not having it is greater than having it. So I'm going to set myself up to have it and use all the tools that are available so that I can use my voice confidently to help you use your voice so that we can all move forward more productively and profitably. And profitably has a myriad of definitions, everything from a relationship healed to the confidence that you feel about yourself to a dollar value, on and on, to a breakthrough, problem solved. So really, it's a mindset issue of you just said it. Having the tough conversation is so important to everybody's well-being and to your responsibility as a leader to make sure that you're running a viable, healthy company that's safe for everybody that you're leading.
Absolutely. Wow, this is delightful and very useful. I have like so many directions I would like to ask you, but let's start with this one. There is an interesting thing that seems to be a case. So when it comes to psychology, we know that extroverts have usually an easier time starting a conversation and carrying than the introverts. Reason being is that extroverts tend to get into a higher level of energy after a conversation that's positive, while the introverts have to invest energy into a conversation because it is a slightly different mindset, and we can go deeper in it. But bottom line is that neither kind likes difficult conversations.
Right.
So this is a universal problem.
Correct.
And so everybody likes to be able to have a difficult conversation, save the $7,500, and motivate or enable the better future.
Yeah, and I think so. Let's just debunk a myth for a second. So extroverts will go into a tough conversation, but they'll wing it. And so extroverts will be like, oh, I'll just go have that conversation with Thomas, and then it bites them on the butt. Introverts will avoid the conversation. And ruminate on it and think about it. And here's the interesting thing. Both of them lose.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, the very first thing that you have to say is, am I prepared to have this conversation? Have I set my intention? Do I have my agendas of questions? Do I know my bullet phrases? Can I stick to my key messaging points? Do I know what I'm going to offer Do I know what I'm going to request of this person? Do I know what a good outcome looks like? Do I know what I'm up to experiencing? Do I know what my expectations are and what I'm expecting to have as a changed behavior going forward? And until you can answer all of that, you're not ready for that conversation. You're just not. And so that's, and you're like, oh, AmyK, do I have to do that for every conversation? No, you have to do that for the tough ones.
Completely agree. So I know that you didn't ask for this, and I'm doing it because I'm staring at it. Can you tell us a little bit about your Get It book? I know it's a bestseller. I know people speak highly of it. Maybe it has more deep insights into what we're talking about. Please tell me.
Yeah, so I take pride in being the queen of magical phrases. So I'm not a fan of scripting, but I love a back pocket brilliant one-liner, and that book is full of them. So personal and professional scenarios. It's like you're talking to me. So the whole book is a conversation of like, oh, if you showed up and said, well, what about this scenario? And what about that scenario? What would I say? What would I do? The book walks you through a bunch of them. I will admit, the subtitle is a little racy. It's like the 5 steps to the sex, salary, and success you want. For some of you, you'll be disappointed to hear it's not that sexy or racy. For others of you, you'll be relieved to know it's not that sexy or racy. It's like a rated G book. But the idea is, how do you get what you want in all of these important conversations? And by the way, getting what you want means the other person is also getting what they want. So it's really taking into consideration the dynamics of a conversation to ensure a win-win for everybody.
Love it. So the call to action is AmyK Hutchins. The name of the book is Get It, and the racy subtitle is 5 steps to the sex, salary success you want.
Okay. Yep.
I'm sorry. I just got to say the word sex. I know that that's not intended thing, but it's an interpersonal thing that we need to perfect. And as anything, what do they say? The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. I don't like that statement, but it is kind of true. And so I love I think I will read the book with pleasure and sacrifice a few nights because I know it's not going to be a fall asleep book. So AmyK, I think this is just the first of many discussions we will have. We have scratched the surface here today because this really can go into so many directions. That we can cooperate in so many ways, but I think we can probably, as the time goes by, maybe towards the end of the year, have some discussion about how do we start a new year with new conversation, new self. So maybe one of those things, this is my decision for 2023, and this is what I need to prepare myself, being that 23 may be a year of recession. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we as leaders get into mindset of saying, hey, this is part of my duty. This is part of my duty to the people, and essentially unburden themselves by doing the right thing.
I'd be honored. I'd be honored to come back. To me, the really kind of conversations that light me up are that forward focused as a leader. What do I want to do for my competitive advantage, my profitability? If the recession's coming, how can I have it impact me, is in the least amount ways possible, and grow my team and yes, get ready for that. So I'd be honored to come back. And thank you for inviting me today. This was so much fun.
Amy, it's my pleasure. As you know, it's rare to take a interview that is like spur of the moment in one take, but this is how it goes. I was flattered.
Thomas, would it have just been a fun conversation?
I think it was. Wow, I never thought it can be this good.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Amy. I will ask you for some notes so that I don't invent them because they're yours. And looking forward to seeing you again. Everybody else.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching and look forward to seeing you soon again. Bye, Amy. Bye, everybody else.